The warmth from behind slowly surrounded, and the hot breath was in the ears. "Are you afraid?" The strange breath around the ears made people so cold that they didn't dare to speak. Lin Zilei seemed to feel that the man was slightly stopped, and then his voice rang out again. "Now regret is still there." She clenched her hands nervously, shaking her head. "I don't regret it. You're at your most beautiful, but this one night was painful but long." Finally, in the middle of the night, in the morning, the man got up and went to the bathroom, and Lin Zilei pulled his tired body out of the room and put on his clothes. Downstairs in the hotel, there was a middle-aged woman who introduced this job to her who was standing there, and when she saw Lin Zilei coming, she handed her a black bag. "This is your remuneration." Lin Zilei almost didn't hesitate to take it, took the money and quickly ran away, not even caring about the pain under his body, just wanted to go to the hospital quickly. The sky was still not bright, so the corridor was very quiet. On the ground in front of the operating room there were 2 ambulance stretchers, because they did not pay for it, so they were not brought into the operating room. Lin Zilei looked at it and couldn't help but be heartbroken, and sobbed and said, "I have money, hurry up and save my mother and brother." She choked up and handed the money in her hand to the doctor. The doctor glanced at it, gave it to the nurse to take inventory, and then asked the staff to take the injured person into the operating room. Lin Zilei didn't see them pushing his younger brother in, and hurriedly jumped up and grabbed the doctor and begged, "And my brother, you save him." The doctor sighed. "It's too embarrassing, your brother can't be saved anymore." "Can't be saved anymore." These words were like a thunderclap that struck Lin Zilei's head, making her eyes black. It hurts, her chest is like being harassed with a knife. It hurts so much that she trembles and sits curled up on the ground. 8 years ago she was 10 years old, her father had an affair and threw away her mother, kicked her pregnant mother away, and she went to a foreign country. Then her younger brother was born at the age of 3, she was found to have autism, which was already in need. Her brother's illness was continuously encountered. She and her mother went to work for others everywhere to live through the day. But a traffic accident, abroad with no relatives, no money, no one to help, made her feel what was on the same road. Forced to the end, she sold herself and couldn't save her brother. There was a pain, it wasn't intense, but it made people feel uncomfortable. It was hard to breathe and the sky was gray, but she had to accept it, and she had to laugh and accept because she had a mother. Mom needed her. After being treated, her mother's health changed well, but when she found out that her brother had died, she seemed to collapse. It was Lin Zilei who hugged her, crying, and said, "Mom, I still have children, try to live well for me." During a month in the hospital, Zhang Kaiwa often sat by the bedside. Lin Zilei knew that she missed her brother. "If it weren't for me, I was just afraid that my mother would have followed my brother, because I had to take care of my mother. She would have been expelled from school, but my mother's wound would have changed for the better." She carries things. She walked into the hospital, arrived at the door of the hospital room, and when she raised her hand and was about to open the door, she heard a voice inside. She was very familiar with it. Even though she had been away for 8 years, she still remembered the way he had forced her mother to divorce her. After bringing them here, he had never come to see them once. What did he mean by suddenly appearing here today? "Caillou, in the past, you and the landlady of the Tong family were in love like sisters. You decided to get engaged from a young age. According to the morality, the engagement you decided must be married by your daughter." "Lin Yuanzhong, what do you mean?" Zhang Kaiyua's body was thin. Even though there were wounds on his body, he stood up and wanted to hit him. Was he still a person? Arrange for her and her daughter to stay in this strange and demonic place, never caring about their lives and deaths. And today she wants her daughter to get married? The eldest uncle of the Tong family is also the son of a good friend of hers. He looks good-looking. The lineage of the Tong family you also know. Marrying that side is only a blessing. Speaking of the back, his voice became smaller. The eldest brother of the Tong family is indeed noble, with a polite appearance, but a month ago, he went abroad to work and was bitten by a poisonous snake, paralyzed by a nervous snake, unable to act, and unable to do anything. Getting married there is like being a widow. I'll take it. Lin Zilei suddenly pushed the door open. She stood in front of the door, her hands clenched tightly and gripped the lunchbox in her hand. It's okay to get married, but I have a condition. Lin Yuanzhong looked out the door, saw this daughter who had not seen him for 8 years, and for a moment he panicked for a few seconds. When she was brought in, she was still a 10-year-old child, now an adult. Her skin was white, very thin. Her small face was not as big as the palm of her hand, dry and not fresh at all. as if it was not well developed. It doesn't make people love like the little girl in the house. The reluctance in her heart was also lessened after all. Her appearance was not very beautiful. Even if she married a husband who couldn't do that, it wasn't too frustrating. Thinking so, Lin Yuanzhong didn't see anything wrong. What conditions, say it? I went home with my mother, gave us everything that belonged to her, and agreed to marry. Lin Zilei kept clenching his hands, gradually calming down. Although she has not been in the country every year, she has heard of the Tong family of City B before, the huge family, the wealth of millions. The owner of the Tong family is naturally noble. Lin Zilei didn't feel that such a good thing would come to him. Maybe the whole Tong family was very bad or his body was flawed. But even so, this is also a very good opportunity to return home with her, make good use of it, and even win back the property that is her mother's dowry. Lei Lap. Trang Ka Yu wanted to advise her. Big things like getting married couldn't be joked. She had followed her to suffer a lot, and she couldn't let her bring the whole marriage in. Lin Yuanzhong heard that, worried that Lin Zilei, who was persuaded by Zhang Kaiwe, would not want to get married, and hurriedly said, "Okay, as long as you are willing to marry, I will give you go home. What about my mother's dowry?" Lin Zilei looked at his nominal father, and his voice was extremely cold. Before Zhang Kaiwe married him, he really had a lot of dowry, which was not a small amount, and now asking Lin Yuanzhong to take it out made him very unbearable. "Dad, maybe my other sister is very beautiful, she should have something better. If you marry a man whose body is lacking, your whole life is over, let alone you and my mother are divorced. You should also return the money you brought to the Lin family's house, right?" Lin Yuanzhong suddenly dodged and did not dare to look directly at her. How could she know that the Song family elder was an incomplete person? Lin Yuanzhong didn't know that Lin Zilei was just guessing. Thinking that she had to marry an unusual man, Lin Yuanzhong gritted her teeth. "Wait for you to marry me, and I will give it to you. His little daughter is like a flower, like a pearl. How can he marry a man who can't do that? How noble is it? Not being able to do married affairs is different from a disabled person." Thinking of this, Lin Yuanzhong was no longer so uncomfortable. But in her heart, she hated Lin Zilei more than a little, only thinking about taking money from his hands. Lin Yuanzhong looked at her coldly. "Your mother really didn't teach you properly. She didn't know how to be polite at all." Lin Zilei really wanted to say that the father was irresponsible. Throwing her back here has never been careful. But at this time she couldn't say, her advantage was too weak. Provoking Lin Yuanzhong was not beneficial to her. "Prepare a little, come back tomorrow." Lin Yuanzhong swung his sleeve and left the hospital room. "Lei Lap, marriage is a big thing for a lifetime. I won't let you do that." Lin Zilei put the lunchbox on the bedside cabinet, took it out and said, "You don't even marry an outsider. Isn't it your friend's son? She died early, I don't understand her son. Even if I swallow my words, I want you to marry the person you like, not use marriage to your advantage, so I'd rather stay here for the rest of my life. Who do you like?" Even if she met this, she didn't have the qualifications. She lowered her head. It didn't matter who she married. The important thing was to get back everything that was stolen by people. Zhang Kaiwe couldn't persuade Lin Zilei to change his mind, and the next day they immediately returned home. Lin Yuanzhong hated their mother and children, did not let them enter the door of the Lin family's house, but rented a room outside for them to live in, and waited for the day of marriage when Lin Zilei returned. Just as Lin Zilei didn't want to go back when she returned, she would have to face the little wife who sabotaged her marriage. Compared to losing her nature, it was not as good as staying here. Quiet. Zhang Kaiwe was still very worried. "Lei Lap, if this is a good marriage, it won't come to you, even if you and Mrs. Tong have had feelings go back and forth." Lin Zilei didn't want to talk about these things with his mother, so he changed the subject. "Mom, hurry up and eat something." Zhang Kaiwe sighed. Obviously Lin Zilei didn't want to talk about this. She followed her to suffer. Now even marriage has to be sacrificed. Lin Zilei held the chopsticks in his hand, but he had no appetite, and he was also nauseous. "Aren't you comfortable?" Zhang Kaiwe asked with interest. She didn't want to make her worried, saying indiscriminately that she had no appetite after sitting on the plane. Put down his chopsticks and went back to his room. The door of the room closed. She leaned against the doorboard. Although she had never been pregnant, but she had seen the appearance when her mother was pregnant, she was also nauseous and she didn't eat well. and her condition at this time was the same. It had been more than a month since that night, and her red light day was also 10 days late. She didn't dare to think about it anymore. It was already very humiliating that night. If it weren't for her mother and brother, she wouldn't have sold herself either. She trembled. "You're pregnant 6 weeks." Coming out of the hospital, Lindsay Lei was still surrounded by the doctor's message that she was pregnant. Lindsay Lei tricked Zhang Jiyue to go to the hospital for a checkup, and then the result was like this. Her mood was very confused. She didn't know what to do now, birth or breakdown. Her hand couldn't help but cover her stomach, although it was unexpected, even humiliating, but she was still a little reluctant. There is a feeling of joy and anticipation when becoming a mother for the first time. She panicked. Returning to his residence, Lindsay Lei hid the ultrasound paper B, and then pushed the door open. But Lin Yuanzhong was also there, and her face suddenly sank. What did he come to do? Lin Yuanzhong's face was also not very good. It seemed that because of the seeing her hips, he waited for a long time and said coldly, "Go change clothes." Lindsay Lei frowned. "Why? If you have to marry the Tong family, you and the other Tong family must also meet." Lin Yuanzhong watched her from top to bottom. "Are you dressed like this and going to see him? Do you want to make me lose face? What does pain feel like?" She thought that selling herself, her brother died, had caused her pain to death. But hearing Lin Yuanzhong's inadvertent words, his heart would still hurt, not be dumbfounded. "He took me and my mother to a poor Western country, and then never cared about them. Where did you get the money? If she had money, how could her brother die because of delayed treatment?" Her hands fell on her side and clenched into fists. It seemed that Lin Yuanzhong also thought of this, and his expression was a little embarrassed. "Let's go, the Tong family members are about to arrive. It's not convenient for them to wait." Lei Lap. Zhang Kaiwei was worried, still wanted to advise Lindsay Lei. She had already lost her son. Now she just wanted to take good care of her daughter. Money was no longer important. "I also don't want my daughter to enter the Lin family's house again, or the Tong family's house. The rich family is complicated, and he doesn't even know what the eldest brother of the Tong family looks like." She was worried. "Mother." Lindsay Lei gave her a comforting look, so that she could feel more at ease. "Go quickly," Lin Yuanzhong impatiently urged, afraid that Lindsay Lei would change his mind, and even pushed her one by one. Lin Yuanzhong didn't like her, and she didn't have any feelings for this father. In 8 years, all the blood and pus friendship had been consumed. Lindsay Lei was really dressed very old, and she had to meet the Tong family. Lin Yuanzhong led her to a luxurious women's clothing store, and bought a set of temporary clothes for her. Entering the shop, there were also staff to greet him. Lin Yuanzhong pushed Lindsay Lei forward. "Take what clothes he can wear." The staff observed her for a while, and roughly knew what number she was wearing. "Follow me." The staff held a long light blue dress and handed it to her. "Why don't you go to the fitting room?" Lindsay Lei took it and went to the fitting room. "Bye, do you have to marry the daughter of the Lin family?" The woman's voice was vaguely carrying melancholy. Lindsay Lei suddenly heard a voice, so she looked at the next room. Through the gap in the door, she saw the woman hugging the man's neck. "Can you not marry another girl?" Tong Junbai looked at the woman, his eyes seemed to carry reluctance. "This is a marriage matter. Ask his mother to decide for him. He can't change his mind." But thinking about that night, he couldn't bear to let her down. That night, wasn't it very painful? More than a month ago, he went abroad to a backward country to survey an item, and as a result, he was bitten by a snake. Its poison was very strong. If it was not poured out on the woman, it would dry up and die. And by Lu Jia, who made the antidote surname. He himself knew that he couldn't control much at that time. Everyone said that a woman's first time was very painful, and he was merciless. He could think of how much she hurt. But she was so resigned, never spoke up once, just trembling in his heart. Qin Lujia liked him, he always knew, but he never gave her a chance. One is that he doesn't love her, and the other is because his mother has already decided to engage him. But she was always by his side, and from then on, he felt that he should give this woman an identity. Until now, he still remembers how brilliant that red mark was. Qin Lujia buried himself in his lap, his eyes drooped slightly, and he was embarrassed for a while. She liked Tong Junbai, and she had been by his side as a secretary for several years, but she hadn't been a Virgo for a long time. She couldn't let Tong Jinbai know how much men pay attention to women's purity. She understands well. So she gave a sum of money to the townsfolk to find a girl who had never done that to bring her to the other room. Waiting after the girl came out, she went in to create a fake phenomenon that it was her that night. If you like the clothes here, buy some more. Tong Jinbai rubbed her head and said pamperingly, "This is the VIP room, you can't enter, you go to the room on the right." The staff reminded Lin Zilei. The clothing store is so luxurious, the fitting rooms are all independent of each other, and the VIP room is even more luxurious. There is a place to try on clothes in the fitting room, and the outside room is for friends to wait or rest. Ah! Lin Zilei took his clothes and went to the room on the right. When he was changing clothes in the fitting room, Lin Zilei was still thinking. It seemed that in the conversation of a man and a woman just now, there was a Lin family's house. Could it be that the other man? After changing clothes, Lin Zilei walked out of the fitting room, looked at the fitting room on the left. The door was already closed. Very suitable for your temperament. The staff is very eye-catching. Just by looking at the person, you can take out clothes that match that person. Lin Zilei wears a long skirt with light blue eyebrows, which makes her skin even whiter. The waistband on the side is wrapped around her slender waist, looking a little too thin, but her face is very beautiful. Lin Yuanzhong saw that it was suitable and immediately paid for it, and at this time he discovered that the dress was up to 90 million. But thinking that she had to meet the Tong family, he gritted his teeth to pay the money, and his voice was as cold as ice. "Let's go." Lin Zilei had already sensed his inadvertence soon, but the coldness at this time still made her heart painfully uncomfortable. She bowed her head and followed him into the car. Soon the car stopped in front of the large gate of the villa. The driver pulled the car door for Lin Yuanzhong. He bent down and went down. Lin Zilei followed. She stood in front of the gate of the villa, panicking for a few seconds. When she and her mother lived better than dying because of her brother's illness, her father was happily enjoying in the villa with his little wife. Her hands couldn't help but clench. "What are you standing there for?" Lin Yuanzhong didn't see anyone following him, turned his head and glanced at her, and saw her standing in front of the door stunned. Lin Zilei hurriedly chased after her, and when she heard the maid in the house say that the Tong family had not yet arrived, Lin Yuanzhong asked her to wait in the living room. Next to the groundbreaking window of the living room was a piano, a German Seidel, very expensive, which her mother had bought for her on her 5th birthday. Since she was a child, she liked it. When she was 4.5 years old, she started learning the piano, and then she was taken away and she didn't touch it anymore. He couldn't help but touch it, familiar and excited. Her index finger pressed on the keys, gently using force, tinging a sound. A clear melodious sound sounded, because she hadn't played the piano for a long time, so her fingers were much stiffer. "My things, who let you touch them?" A shrill voice carrying anger rang out behind her. "Her things." Lin Zilei turned around, saw Lin Hanyuan standing behind him, remembered that she was a year younger than him. This year she was 17, inheriting Shen Qingying's advantages, and her appearance was not bad. But the gesture of gritting his teeth at this time was somewhat fierce. "Yours. They destroyed my mother's marriage, used my mother's money, and now even the things my mother gave me became hers?" She slowly clenched her hands, constantly silently telling herself not to be emotional, not to get excited, because now she still couldn't take back what belonged to her. You have to endure. She was not a little girl who could only cry and was taken away by her father 8 years ago. Now she is an adult. "You? Is Lin Zilei?" Lin Hanyuan understood that today was the day the Tong family came, and he welcomed the other 2 mothers and daughters back to the country. Lin Hanyuan still remembered the pitiful look when Lin Yuanzhong took them abroad. Lin Zilei knelt on the ground and hugged Lin Yuan's feet, begged him, asking him not to take me away. "Dad picked you up, aren't you very happy?" Lin Hanyuan crossed his arms, looking at her contemptuously. "Don't be too complacent. I brought you back just because I want you to marry into the Tong family's house. I heard that man." After speaking, Lin Hanyuan covered his mouth sarcastically. Remembering that Lin Zilei had to marry a man who couldn't do that, couldn't even walk, couldn't help but feel happy when he met with a disaster. Marriage is a big deal for a lifetime. Marrying a man like that, isn't it cancelled for the rest of your life? Lin Zilei frowned. At this moment the maid walked over. "The people of the Tong family have arrived." Lin Yuanzhong personally went to the door to welcome him. Lin Zilei turned around and immediately saw the man in a wheelchair being pushed in. His five senses were sharp, his appearance was upright. Even if he was in a wheelchair, people did not dare to despise him. This face wasn't the man flirting with the other woman in the fitting room that she saw? You could be the eldest uncle of the Tong family. But in the fitting room, she clearly saw that he could stand, and he was also hugging the other woman. His legs were not defective. What's going on? When she still hadn't thought carefully about why this man had to pretend, Lin Yuanzhong called out to her. Zilei, come here quickly. This is the eldest brother of the Tong family. Lin Yuanzhong shrugged his shoulders flatteringly, arched his back and said, Uncle Tong, this is Lei Lap. Lin Yuanzhong secretly felt sorry. The road was the eldest brother of the Tong family, who was still so good-looking, and became disabled again. Tong Zhenbai looked at Lan Zilei, saw that he was not old, too thin, and looked a little malnourished, and he frowned. This is the marriage his mother decided for him as a son. He can't break his promise. So after going abroad and suddenly being bitten by a poisonous snake, he gave the news that the poison couldn't be solved. He was disabled, and he couldn't even do that. He wanted the Lin family to change his mind. Tong Zhenbai was silent and didn't say anything. His face was heavy. Lin Yuanzhong thought that he was not satisfied and hurriedly explained. Now she is young, just 18, and she has grown up and is definitely a beautiful person. Tong Zhenbai secretly laughed coldly. The beauty didn't look at it, but it was not trivial. He was a lame person, and wanted his daughter to marry him. He was cold with a deep smile. I went abroad to work. I was not careful and injured. This leg is afraid that I will not be able to walk anymore, and I will not be able to perform the responsibilities of a husband. I don't mind. Lin Zilei immediately replied. Lin Yuanzhong agreed with her. As long as she married into the Tong family's house, she would return her mother's dowry, even if she entered the door the day before, and the next day she divorced. Now she also had to agree. During this time she thought carefully about everything. It was obvious that he could stand up, but when she came to the Lin family's house, she was in a wheelchair, probably because the other woman also didn't want to make the appointment, wanted the Lin family to change her mind first. But he didn't expect Lin Yuantrong is willing to sacrifice her unspoiled daughter to complete the contract. Tong Zhenbai narrowed his eyes and stared at her. Lin Zilei was stared at by him to the spine, and his heart was sour. Would he want to marry into the Tong family? Disagreed. How could she go back to her country? How could she get back what she had lost? She curled her lips and smiled, bitter and sour, in which only she knew. We've been engaged since we were children. No matter how you become, I have to marry you. Tong Zhenbai's gaze was even heavier. This woman also knew how to talk. Lin Yuanzhong also didn't hear anything wrong, and probed and asked, So the wedding day? Tong Zhenbai's expression changed in the blink of an eye, and finally calmly replied, Of course I will follow the contract. This is a matter decided by the two families in advance. How can I swallow the words? Lin Zilei drooped his eyes, hiding his thoughts, not daring to look at him. It was very obvious that he was also not satisfied with this marriage proposal. Now agreeing is just because of an appointment. That's good. Lin Yuanzhong was secretly happy, using a daughter who was not excellent to associate with the Tong family. Of course it was a good thing. Although the Lin family also has money compared to the Tong family, it is only a big fish meets a small fish, just like a shark and a shrimp. Absolutely impossible to equate with each other. Lin Yuanzhong bent over and said in a low voice, I've already had someone prepare dinner. Stay and eat. Let's go. Tong Zhenbai frowned. This flattering antics of his made people very uncomfortable. No need, I still have a job. Tong Zhenbai refused. Guangjing pushed him out. When he passed by Lin Zilei's side, he raised his hand slightly, intending to tell Guangjing to stop. He raised his eyes and asked, Is Miss Lin free? Although it is a question, it makes people unable to refuse. Lin Zilei nodded, looking at his appearance. He had something to say to her. At the same time, she also wanted to talk to him. Lin Yuanzhong looked at her warningly. Maybe a little ink. Don't be unmarried and have won people's sins. Seeing Tong Zhenbai's cold appearance, perhaps he is not satisfied with Lin Zilei, but having a family relationship with the Tong family is also beneficial to the Lin family, and can also help the company's business. He also didn't want Lin Zilei to fail this. Lin Zilei pretended not to notice, and followed Guangjing outside. She understood what Lin Yuanzhong intended. Where did he get the confidence that after she married into the Tong family's house, he would help him? Just because he was your father? But does he consider himself a girl? Do you know how she has been living for the past 8 years? Lin Zilei was thinking vaguely. Her head hit a hard wall that made her come to her senses, and immediately discovered an unmistakable face that was close to her, arrogantly looking at her. Fruit. He could indeed stand. It proved that she had guessed correctly. Lin Zilei was looked at with a stretched scalp. She tried to pretend to calmly raise her head to look at him. You're deliberately pretending, right? Tong Zhenbai narrowed his eyes, unhappy to be seen through by people. His tone was neither high nor low, but he swung scared. Why am I a lame person who still wants to marry me? What do I value? Money. Do you want to be a rich landlady? Lin Zilei only felt that he looked at the bones under the flesh was also cold. His heart seemed to be tightened, and it was difficult to breathe, but his expression was calm. When I was 2 years old, I was engaged to Mr. Song. Did I know the benefits of money and be a rich landlady when I was 2 years old? So you are determined to let the two of us get engaged. She paused for a moment, her tone seemed to be softer. When I was 2 years old, Mr. Tong was 10 years old, 8 years older than me. Did I criticize him for being old? Ha! Tong Zhenbai laughed coldly. This woman doesn't just know how to speak. It's obvious that she is quick to speak. The tongue is very beneficial. Old man? The air was filled with the smell of gunpowder. The 4 eyes looked at each other. Sparks were scattered everywhere, and everyone refused to give in. Her hands drooped on Lin Zilei's side and tightened into a fist. Her purpose in marrying into the Tong family's house was only because Lin Yuanzhong promised to return her mother's wedding clothes to her. It wasn't that she wanted to be an enemy with this man. Her voice was gentle again, and her appearance was humble. Mr. Tong, I know you don't want to marry me. In fact, it's not impossible. She deliberately looked back at Tong Zhenbai's face. His expression only changed slightly, but she could still see it. Mr. Tong, let's trade. Lin Zilei spoke up. In fact, she didn't want to marry into the Tong family very much. She would agree just because she wanted to return from abroad and get back the dowry that belonged to her mother. Huh. Tong Zhenbai smiled quietly. It seemed to feel funny and mythical. Dealing with you? Lin Zilei swallowed a mouthful. Her back was covered in a layer of cold sweat because of the tension. Tong Zhenbai was very tall. She had to raise her head to look at him. I know you pretend to want the Lin family to change your mind about this. I will agree to have my own suffering. This made Tong Zhenbai interested. What do you want? If it is a transaction, there are definitely conditions. 1 month. After a month of marriage, I will divorce you. 1 month is enough. As long as she gets her mother's dowry, she will divorce him. Tong Zhenbai frowned. This is the transaction you want to tell me? That's right, we must get married. This is the promise of the 2 mothers. We can't swallow our words. This is respect for them. But after getting married, if our personalities are not compatible, we will divorce clearly, so it is not considered to be swallowing words. You don't need to live your whole life with someone you don't like. You don't have any harm. It's only beneficial. Speaking of which, Lin Zilei's tone was a little more relaxed. I think Mr. Tong must have someone he likes, so he can think of all kinds of ways to make the Lin family fail to promise, right? Tong Zhenbai's face became heavy and serious, and he said silently, I didn't expect you to be so smart. Yes, he wanted to give Qin Lujie an identity, and her innocence and resignation at that time touched him. Tong Zhenbai looked at her calm face. What about you? What's the benefit of being married for a month? Tong Zhenbai also didn't think that she was only thinking for herself. Lin Zilei was tense in his heart, and he couldn't say that it was because of his mother's dowry, right? But if there wasn't a reason, it seemed that he wouldn't believe it either. My mother takes this engagement very seriously. Her health is not good, so I don't want to disappoint her. When she spoke, her eyes were a little evasive because she was lying, and her mother didn't want her to marry into the Tong family at all. Tong Zhenbai's tone suddenly carried an incomprehensible heavy majesty, as if seeing through her thoughts. Is that so? Lin Zilei seemed to be sitting still. His eyes were too sharp, as if he could see through people's hearts. When she didn't know what to do, the phone in his pocket rang. Tong Zhenbai took a look at her, took out his mobile phone, saw the name on the announcement. His face was a little gentler, turned to answer the phone, seemed to think of something again and turned his head. If it's a month, we don't need to hold a wedding ceremony. Lin Zilei had no choice, he could only agree. Okay. On the 12th of August, Kwang Kin came to pick up Lin Zilip. There was no ceremony, no wedding ceremony, only a marriage certificate. Lin Zilei didn't care much either, because she understood that this was just an on-demand transaction. If it weren't for the engagement since childhood, I'm just afraid that they would never have met. Soon the car stopped in front of the gate of the villa. Architecture Australia is vast under the sun, extremely energetic. Come in. Kwang Kin made an inviting pose. Not enthusiastic, nor did he win her heart, just followed the rules. Perhaps he also knew that the marriage between her and Tong Jinbai was just the completion of the contract. Nor is she the real owner of the Tong family. Although the building is big, there are not many people. There is only one maid. Kwang Kin didn't introduce much, took her into the room and left immediately. Lin Zilei was not very familiar. This is the master's residence. I'm Mother Wang who takes care of his life. You can also call me that. Ma Wang led her to the room. If you need anything, just tell me. A month is not too long. Lin Zilei brought her daily necessities, although she probably won't bother her, but still said, okay. Ma Wang opened the door of the room, turned to look at her, and was about to say something to her but finally just sighed. Maybe the master won't come back tonight. Today is Miss Qin's birthday. Although they didn't have a wedding ceremony, for better or worse, this person is also his wife-in-law. No matter how you say it, today is their first wedding day. He is outside with another woman. Wang's mother saw that Lin Zilei was pitiful, just entered the door and was so cold by Tong Jinbai. Wouldn't it be even more tragic in the future? Lin Zilei seemed to guess what Wang's mother meant, and didn't explain but just laughed. She and Tong Jinbai were just transactions, and her brother's personal activities did not have the right to inquire. He wasn't here. Lin Zilei was a little more relaxed. Lin Zilei entered the room and saw clearly the interior. The black and white decoration style was unique, simple and neat, both extravagant and not vulgar, polite and elegant, and had its own flavor. This is the master's room. Ma Wang smiled. If they are married, they are husband and wife, of course they must be together. Lin Zilei opened his mouth, and found that he was speechless, and could only nod his head in response. The first night sleeping in a strange place was very difficult, so she leaned on the head of the bed and watched Dongtan 58 on the phone, preparing to find a job, having a new job that could take good care of her mother and give the child in her womb a future. Lin Zilei suddenly saw that there was an announcement of interpretation, and it was not strange to announce the recruitment of interpreters, and he was surprised to know the language of Country A. Country A is the country she was taken to by Lin Yuanzhong. It is very backward in a tropical place. There are not many people who learn the language of that country. The prevailing languages in the world are all languages of quite developed and capable countries. The salary and remuneration are not bad. So she left her personal information, then let go of the phone and lay down to sleep. The moonlight shone down in front of the window like a ray of light flowing down, extremely gentle, and the night was long and quiet. The woman on the bed fell asleep unconsciously. A beam of white light from outside ran into the yard, and a Maybach car stopped. The car door opened, a tall figure went down. He strode into the house. His pace was not as steady as usual. There was some staggering. He pulled his collar. His tongue was a little dry. He walked into the house and poured a glass of water. His hard pharynx kept rolling up and down. His dark pupils were covered with drunken yeast, and after drinking the glass of water, the burning sensation in his throat also eased a lot. He drank a lot of imperial wine, and on Qin Lujia's birthday, he drank several glasses of red wine. People who have a high alcohol content like him are also a little drunk. He took off his coat and put it on the sofa, did not go to the bathroom but went straight to the room. In the room the light was not on, it was very dark, and he walked to the side of the bed. Lin Zilei, who was fast asleep, felt a noise, but soon it was quiet, and she curled up and continued to sleep. Early morning. Waves of light shone in like golden threads, illuminating the whole room. The two of them slept very soundly. It's like a couple of sweet lovers. The man's eyelashes fluttered slightly, and he slowly opened his eyes wide. One drunken night, he just felt heavy in his head and needed to take a shower to regain his senses. When he raised his arm to stand up, he found that something was pressing on him. He tilted his head, and immediately saw a woman lying in his lap. The girl had black hair like a waterfall. Each strand fell on his arms, white cheekbones, eyelashes curled like butterfly wings, her pale pink lips slightly raised, and she breathed evenly. His gaze slowly moved down, his neck was slender, and his collarbone was elegant. She breathed heavily, and brought a hint of seductive flavor. His servant Yen couldn't help but roll. Even with Qin Lujia, he had never been so emotional. He frowned, seemingly very disliked the reaction of not being able to control his body like this, but he couldn't take his eyes off. While sleeping, Lin Zilei dreamed that he was being stared at by a fierce lion on the vast African savanna, as if he wanted to eat him. She woke up from her dream, but at the moment of opening his eyes, hitting his eyes was a pair of calm, deep pupils. The cerebrum was empty for a moment. She opened her eyes wide, covered her chest and spoke in a messy voice. Why are you here?" The man calmly moved his eyes away, and slowly lifted the blanket. "This is my place." Lin Zilei wanted to retort, seeing the situation in the room. The words came to his mouth and swallowed again. "Didn't you go to your girlfriend's birthday? Why did you come back here?" Lin Zilei stepped down from the bed and stood to the side. The tone carried a hint of questioning. "Yesterday, I heard Wang's mother say that he didn't come home in the evening, and then he relaxed his vigilance, so he slept a little drunk, but he didn't even know that he entered the room. Yesterday she was able to sleep in the same room as this man. Thinking that I slept in his lap yesterday, my cheeks were extremely hot." She bowed her head. Tong Zhenbai unbuttoned his shirt. He didn't see **Q***N shirt last night. His clothes still carried the smell of alcohol, and the wrinkles on his body were very uncomfortable. He looked at the girl who was shyly standing by the bed, curled his lips slightly. "Girlfriend's birthday, is it as important as the night of the flower room?" Lin Zilei. "This is a transaction, they are not husband and wife. What is the night of the flower room?" Tong Zhenbai took off his shirt. Lin Zilei hurriedly turned her head. This man could do it right in front of her. Since that night, she has been very disliked by men, especially in close contact with them. She panicked. I'll go out first." After speaking, he ran out of the room as fast as lightning. Tong Zhenbai didn't pay much attention either. ********************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** water sounded from the bathroom. About an hour passed. He finished taking a shower with the scent of bath sanitizer. His short black hair was a little messy. The white swimsuit surrounded his slender figure. The bodice was slightly open, and his honey-colored skin seemed to be hidden, radiating a masculine charm that cannot be despised. He walked to the front of the closet, and when he was about to get his clothes, he found a bag printed with strange sunflowers. You paused. Is it that woman's? As for flower printing, why are you so naive? Moreover, it is not different. H put her things in his closet. He frowned, took out his clothes and put them on, and when he let go of the rack, he carelessly dropped her bag. The lock did not pull back because it fell down. It dropped all the things inside, simple clothes and daily necessities. He squatted down, and just as he was about to pick it up, he found an ultrasound paper. B. Lindsay Lay, female, early test 6 weeks. The other woman is pregnant.